Welcome to It's a New Day for Hope, Healing, and Happiness. I'm your host, Natasha Rosewood. I am a psychic spirit medium, ghostbuster, quantum healing, and author. And today I'm so excited to share with you, with Halloween in our rearview mirror, some really amazing ghost stories of dead and alive people. My guest today will be Melissa Allenbach. She is a client/friend of mine who lives here in Kelowna. And a few years ago, she invited me to go to this very old house in Kelowna because her friend, Colin, was having some issues in the house with ghosts. So we'll be telling that story later on in the show. So stay tuned. You won't want to miss it. It's a real doozy. And the other thing about today's show is we're going to be talking about, are you still haunted by something or someone? And there are many types of hauntings that we experience. And some of them, I'm going to give you my top 5, and we'll be exploring what each of those means. So the first one is past event reverberations. And we all have a past. Many of us still live in that past, and those past event reverberations can come from a trauma, a lost love, and or a past life itself. And then number 2 is guilt. This is a big one. This is why ghosts haunt, because many of them are feeling guilty, but we'll get more into that again later as well. And number 3 is possession. That's going into the darker, lower, and astral planes. And with each one of these, I will explain what the solution is to stop this kind of negative energy plaguing you. Number 4 is attachments. Those are lost souls that can come in and they like us, or there's a reason why they're attracted to us. Again, we'll be talking about that too. And finally, good old ghosts. And we know that ghosts come in all shapes and sizes and forms, and we'll be talking about the many variety of those and how you can be your own ghostbuster today. So the theme is, are you still haunted? Because we've got all these different kinds of ghosts. So when we go into past event reverberations, what I'm talking about there are traumas primarily. Being born is a trauma. We've all had traumas of some kind. They vary in intensity. But when we have a trauma, often that plays itself over and over again in our mind. And we can be triggered by a red bus going by or the sound of a bell, because it takes us right back to the event when that trauma happened. What happens with a trauma is it needs to be healed. And when we are traumatized, it's very difficult to do it on our own. So I do recommend a trauma counselor, a grief counselor, or coming to me for a quantum healing, because you don't want that record to keep playing and for it to get in the way of your happiness. The other past event reverberation can be lost love. And I'm not just talking romantic love here. Often we do have romantic loves, that the one that got away, and we often think, oh, if I'd only done this, if I'd only done that, maybe it would have turned out differently. But recognizing that lost loves come into your life and leave for a very good reason, and it's just to really, even though the relationships don't work out, to value the experience and to take the lessons from that. The other one for a past event reverberation is absolutely past lives. So I know many of you just believe that we only have one kick at the bucket, but actually, thank heavens, I believe that we can live thousands and thousands of times, and not just on this planet. But don't come and take me away in a straitjacket just yet, because I've had many, many clients who've come to me, and they'll either come to me and say, Natasha, I'm really afraid of this. I've got this phobia. I'm agoraphobic, or I'm afraid of birds. And so I say, well, let's do a past life, because I'm not sensing this phobia has arisen from anything that's happened in your current lifetime. And or clients will come to me for a reading, and I will sense an old trauma, and I'll say, well, did this ever happen to you? Do you understand why this? Because this feels like it's an old event. And they'll shake their head, look at me blankly like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. But yes, you're right. I do feel this kind of deep-seated fear and I don't know why, and it does get in the way of me living a full life. So then we'll do a past life regression, and what we'll do is we'll go into whatever happened and we'll turn it on its head, we'll reframe it so that the client feels that they have power over it. They've been disempowered in the past life and they want to get that power back so they can make peace with what happened, the people that were involved in that event, and forgive themselves and or the other people in the process so that they are free to go forward. And I've helped people cure physical diseases by doing past life regressions as well. So it's very, very powerful stuff. The next one is guilt. Well, I don't know about you, but I think I seem to sense that all of us feel like we're guilty when we're born. Maybe it's because we put our mother through so much pain in coming into the world. I don't know where that guilt comes from, except from past lives. So guilt is something that is a valuable emotion because it does teach us right from wrong, unless you're a psychopath and you don't know the difference. But guilt keeps us on the straight and narrow. But what people do with guilt is they do the deed, feel guilty, and then they stay in the guilt. And then that becomes a wasted emotion and a waste of energy because you're putting yourself constantly in a lower frequency. So what you need to do about guilt, of course, is either forgive yourself and or forgive the person that gave you that bad feeling. And if you need to forgive somebody else, you can look at it like they gave you a big bag of bricks and you're just handing the bricks back to them. If that person that you feel guilty about has passed on and is now in the afterlife, write them a letter and explain everything, why you feel bad about what happened, what you would have liked to have had happen. And then once you've written that letter to them, ask them to give you a sign from the other side. And the sign can be a song, a little white feather, a dime, or coming to you in your dreams and saying, we're done, you're good, it's over, carry on. So just so you know that when you do feel guilty about somebody that's gone on to the other side, you're actually holding them back as well a little bit. You're still attached to them a little bit by a bit of an umbilical cord. So by you forgiving yourself and or them, you free them up as well. So that's like a reverberation that goes out, and it's a beautiful feeling. You will feel uplifted, you'll feel free, and you'll automatically rise to a high frequency. Third one is possession. So I don't know if you've ever watched The Exorcist. Personally, I could not watch that because my mother, I believe, was very possessed. So it was not fun to be around her. It can be very scary. But in the energy field, like attracts like. And these spirits that want to possess are people that are very, very negative. They've died and they either don't believe they deserve to go to the higher realms or they don't want to. They're not interested. They want to get back into the physical. And they'll choose people that are very vulnerable. So often these people are people that are depressed, that have been traumatized and are using substance abuse to kill their pain. They're psychically open, but they're not positive. These are people that are very vulnerable to possession. I'm not saying it's automatic because there has to be an agreement between you and that possessor. And what you can do if you don't want to deal with these lower frequency energies is really protect yourself with light. And what I do is I pretend every day that I'm standing under a beautiful beam of light like a shower, and it's just raining down on me, going into every cell of my being, my physical being. It's cleansing my aura, and then it's ending up by cushioning me in a white bubble of bright white light, which is the frequency of love. So love is actually your protection. So even if you're feeling depressed and you've got no energy and you've got nobody to talk to, you can do that for yourself instantly. And remember, when you walk into a dark room and you switch on the light, what happens to the dark? It's gone just like that. So you too can help yourself instantaneously. The fourth one is attachment. And attachments are a bit trickier because they're more subtle energies. They're still on the lower astral planes. These are more lost souls. They're not evil. They won't do you any harm, but they will attach themselves to you, and you might experience something like a low-grade flu or being slightly depressed, like clinically depressed, because they are taking your energy. They're kind of symbiotic. And by the way, attachments, the lower version of attachments, can show up in human form. I've known a few vampire energies myself. And so the way to deal with that, again, is to get into that high frequency of light, because, again, like attracts like. So if you're in that white light protected energy frequency, feeling love, compassion, and wanting to feel happier, those lower astral plane attachments will just move away from you, or they'll go and find somebody else. If you want to help them, you can say, would you like to go over to the other side, and ask them if they'd be willing for their angels and guides to escort them into the light. That would be really, really helpful. The final one is ghosts. My favorite topic. I love doing ghost busting. Out of all the things I do in my healing work, ghost busting is the most powerful and my favorite. And I think because I'm helping people that have been suffering for maybe hundreds of years. And today I'm going to invite Melissa to come up and share our ghost story with you. So welcome, Melissa. Hi. Thank you for coming in. So this was about, 2 years ago, I think. We bumped into each other in the Cactus Club, right?
Yeah.
And you with your friend Marion.
Yeah.
And you take it from there. What happened?
Well, I think that's when we invited you over to come see, because we had an experience at our other friend's house, Colin. We were over, I think, a few weekends before that, and we had gone down to the basement to get a bottle of wine from the wine cellar, and he had some Halloween decorations downstairs, and it was like two twins. I think they might have been from a show or something. They're like mannequins.
Mannequins, yeah.
Yeah. And it was like two small girls in these like nightgowns. They're supposed to be quite scary. He said he put them out in the yard.
Yes.
Halloween. But so my friend saw them, and she's like, "Oh, take my picture!" And I started taking a video. And as I was taking the video, the door behind her just like opens, but it wasn't like a open. It was just like very creepy. Slightly opens like this while she's like posing, and I was like, and I'm taking the video, and I'm like, well, that was weird. So then we replayed the video, and we're watching it over and over again, and we're like, oh my god, okay, that actually is really weird. And she's like, but it's too far away. She's like, I didn't kick it. She's like, nothing happened. And the door was actually like closed. It wasn't. So we look back in the video to see like, was the door like, kind of propped open? Maybe it was like when she went by or something. But no, the door was like closed, and then opened. So it was really creepy. And so then we had gone upstairs, and then my friend was like, you know what, I feel like I need to go get the girls. I think they want to come party with us upstairs. So she went and got them, and they hung out upstairs with us, and yeah, we had a couple of bottles of wine, and she brought her downstairs.
So I got the phone call from Colin. I think it was a phone call or an email. And he invited me to come over, and it wasn't a dark and stormy night. Actually, it was a beautiful summer's evening, which was a good thing. And before I go to a ghost busting, I was kind of tuned into the property just to make sure it's not demonic energy, that it's just an unhappy ghost. And what I got was this very dark house with narrow corridors and things. So when I got over there, I think you answered the door, Melissa, and I went in, and Colin was there. And I looked around and I went, oh, good, he's modernized it. And I asked him, have you knocked a lot of walls down? He said, oh, yeah, it was so dark in here. I went, yeah. So you showed me the video then, and I went, well, this is interesting. And as I walked into this house, I can say that I just felt so many ghosts. And I went, oh, this is going to be a long one. But we went downstairs, and Colin, I don't think, had any idea what was going on really in terms of who the ghosts were or whatever. So we went down to the basement. I know he was really creeped out when he went to the wine cellar, which was right in the middle of the basement. And this is a long room. And I came down the stairs, and I saw the two mannequins standing at the far end, and offending door. And I just do a walkabout, and I just walk around and I just feel the energy, because you can walk into a pocket of energy with ghosts. And I went to the far end and I said, oh, the ghost is down here. And what I felt was a young man about 35, and he was trapped in that house because he'd been taking care of his mother who sat in a wheelchair, and she was horrible to him. I think she was an alcoholic. She was very nasty to him. And he had also passed away after his mother had passed away. And I'm not too sure if he committed suicide or not. But I said, why are you still here? And he said, oh, I don't want to go to the other side. And I said, well, why not? He said, well, I'm afraid I'm going to meet up with my mother. And I went, yeah, I know that one. So, because I had a psycho mother too. So I said, well, she's gone to the other side now, and she's actually released all her nastiness. She's gone back to her loving essence. And then he said, but I'm not going to leave without the girls. And so I want to be clear about this. When I experience the ghost, it's just in my mind's eye, but they're talking very clearly to me. And it's just like having a conversation with a live person. So he said, I'm not leaving without the girls. And I'm going, girls? What girls? And he was sitting down, and I said, well, come on, we'll take you and the girls up. So then he sat with these two girls on either lap and kind of either leg. And I tried to send them up, but it didn't really take, not for him, but not the girls. And then the girls suddenly appeared on this side of me. And I saw them as like a 12 and a 9-year-old, and wearing these kind of flowered dresses. And I did not make the connection between these two girls and the mannequins at the time. I'm going, duh, why didn't I? But anyway, so I'm asking them for their story, and they're telling me that it was probably in the 1920s that they were taken from their home in 100 Mile House or somewhere in that area. They seemed to be like far from a farming community or even Mennonite. I wasn't too sure. Very, very kind of earthy family. And they were brought to Kelowna. They were kidnapped, abducted by this scraggly-looking man with big sideburns and a flat cap on this old cart. And they'd been brought to this house. And these girls were very angry. And I asked them why, and they said nobody came looking for us. And I said, well, we didn't have Amber Alerts in those days, or cell phones or text. And nobody thought to come looking in Kelowna for these two girls. So we had the two girls, and I said, well, okay, how can I help you? Anyway, we started talking about where they were buried, not in the house, but on the property. And they told me, I think they told me at that point, that they'd been buried and moved about 3 times. I may have found that out later, I'm not too sure. But anyway, then I started talking to Chris, and he said, well, are they in the wine cellar? Because the wine cellar really creeps me out. So I moved forward, and then you tell us what happened then.
Oh, and then the mannequins started talking.
What?
They turned on, but we had known there was no batteries in them at all. So the fact that these mannequins turned on and started talking, that was
pretty creepy.
Yeah, very creepy. Very creepy.
Because I remember
we're all in the basement and we're doing like the ghost busting, and Natasha's talking to the ghost, and we're like sitting there we're like, oh my God, we're like listening to this crazy story. And then all of a sudden the mannequins start talking behind us. I'm standing and they're behind me, and I'm like, oh my God.
And the weird thing is, what they said is, we want to go and play outside, but Daddy told us we can't because there's blood all over the ground. And I went, what? And Colin went, what? And so these mannequins had kind of a library of dialogue, things they said. And at Halloween, Colin put them out in the front garden under this big oak tree where there's this gorgeous little flower garden. And he would position them there. And as people walked by, they had to be emotion detected.
Motion center,
yeah, and then they would speak. But what they said that night was not in any of their kind of repertoire. Yeah. So I went, oh, okie dokie then. We have real life ghosts here. So I think the girls then were in the actual mannequins so that they could communicate with me and us. So we decided, I think we decided to move out into the basement, and we went out into the hallway. And I remember saying that there's something about the staircase, because I feel like this young man might have hung himself on the staircase, and Colin said, "Oh, as soon as I moved in, that configuration was all wrong, so I changed it." And I said, "Well, that's good that you did that, but the ghost of this young man is still here. So we're going to, deal with that." And then when we went upstairs, was it you or Marion that told me, or maybe even Colin said that there was a mother and son next door, and the mother was in the wheelchair, and she was very
Yeah, that
nasty
was
to the
Colin.
son.
Because he knew the neighbors, and he
Okay,
thought there was a weird kind of dynamic there with the mother, and he said they were always so
yeah.
angry, and yeah, and it was a really interesting dynamic between them.
Well, this is very interesting from a ghost busting point of view because often, and you probably know this, ghosts don't like to be alone in a house. So if there's another ghost 3 doors down, they'll go and hang out with that ghost. Because can you imagine being a ghost? You've got a trouble or a worry, and you've got nobody to talk to, nobody can even see you. So that's why they kind of play with the light switches or rattle the doorknobs or do whatever they do because they just want attention, and most of them want help. Some of them just want to mess with your head, but many of them just want help. So I think the ghost of the son had moved into this house,
Yeah.
so he could be with the other ghosts and not be alone. And he'd formed an attachment to the spirits of the girls as well.
Mm-hmm.
So then we went upstairs, and I'm in the living room, and I'm feeling there's a lot of energy in this living room. It's not good. There could have been a married couple who lived there who did a lot of fighting, but we just I said to to Colin, I'll be coming back because there's layers and layers of ghosts here. But just we'll let it be for the time being. I feel like the young man did kind of go at the end of it, but it wasn't the normal where I see the light and it's just like a um, big release. It's like the house is breathing itself. So I went home, and sure enough, about a week and a half later, I get a phone call saying, "Natasha, can you come back? I've got things going on and it's happening all at 1 o'clock at night." And I went, "Okay, I'll be right back." And I said, "I think the girls are still there and they really want help. So let's do a longer session this time." So you were there for that one. Again, it was a beautiful summer's evening, must have been July. And I remember going in to Chris, and first, before you arrived, I think he told me that these pictures were falling off the wall with glass in them onto the floor, and the glass wasn't breaking. And then upstairs, and I didn't realize there was even an upstairs at that point, music was going off, 1 o'clock in the morning, blaringly loud. So I said, "Well, they definitely want your attention. So we're going to, have another go at this." So this time, and I thought this was very brave of me actually, we went back down to the basement, and I said, "Okay, I'm going to talk to the mannequins." So I stood in front of them, and I'm praying that they don't start swiveling their heads and spewing slime because I wasn't sure. And I just said, "How can I help you? What do you need?" Oh, and prior to that, we'd been around the property, and I'd actually located where they were buried, and their final resting place was in that flower bed under that tree where coincidentally Colin placed the mannequins every Halloween, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Very weird. So I went down. I think you must have been standing in the doorway behind me. I don't know what you saw, but so I talked to the mannequins, and I felt like I was silly talking to these mannequins, but I knew the girls were in. And I said, "How can I help you?" And they waved a hand outside, and they said, "Well, we want our bodies to be found." And I said, "Okay, well, maybe we can do something about that. I think I know where they are." And then suddenly, in my mind's eye, and this is reminiscent of many a ghost busting, I suddenly saw this beautiful walled garden. And I'm going, "What's going on here?" And through one gate, the girls' parents came rushing through with an older brother, which I didn't know they had. And then on the other side, the girls came through, and they all embraced. And it was this most beautiful reunion after maybe 80, 100 years almost. 100 years.
Got goosebumps.
Oh, and that's when I felt like, ah, they've gone, they're good. And then one of them came back down and said, "You don't need to find our bodies anymore. We're good. We're just out of here. We're done." And I went, "Okay, thank you very much. Goodbye. Have a nice life." So they were finally gone. The mannequins were free of those spirits. And then what happened, as soon as they were gone, then the original homeowner showed up. And I'll call him John. This homeowner was kind of medium height, very dark hair. I felt like Italian or um, indigenous, but he was very powerful. He either owned a grocery store, he was the mayor, and he put on a very good show of being a good guy, but there was a very, very dark side to him. And he was a man that employed the scraggly looking man to bring the girls to this house. And the scraggly guy, I'll call him Joe, was afraid of John. So he worked for him, but he was very afraid of him. And I said to Colin, sorry, I'm going to come back and have to deal with John because he's going to be a whole ghost busting unto himself. So we went upstairs, and I think that was really the end of that session. I know we were there a long time. So then finally, I went back for the session number 3 to deal with John, the homeowner. And this was so interesting because just Marion and Colin were there. And we just decided to sit at the kitchen table. And I thought it was interesting that you weren't there, actually. And Marion was very indignant. She said, oh, my God, this guy is a child abductor, and I've got no time for people like that. And I said, well, we have to have compassion because we all make mistakes in life. And, you know, he wasn't a good guy. We know that. But we need to release him from this house. So she was very good. So we sat around and held hands. And I asked John if he would come in and was he willing to leave the house. And he said he wanted to leave the house, but he didn't feel ready to go to heaven because he'd been such a bad guy. And then he showed me not just the 2 girls that he'd abducted, but there was a whole line of children. And he said he'd hidden them in the upstairs. There's a bedroom, and there's attic spaces on 2 sides, which I did not know. And these children were stuffed away in these attic spaces. And I'm not even sure what he was doing with the children, whether it was a slavery ring or he was selling them, or it was a sex traffic ring of old, but it was not good. And I asked Colin, does that make sense to you? He said, oh my God, I've got a bedroom upstairs and there's a door behind the wardrobe, and you go through the door and there are these 2 attic spaces on either side. So nobody would know they were there unless they were looking for them. And I felt like parties had gone on in this house with these poor children stuffed away in these attic spaces. So I asked John if he was forgiven, or, that he was indeed a very bad guy. I said, why did you do those deeds? And he said, well, as a child, I was always bullied. I was always the outsider, and I wanted to have power. So he knew he could have power over children. And so he needed to do a lot of work on the other side so he could mend that karma, that very bad karma. And then suddenly his wife appeared, and his wife's name was Mary, and she seemed like a really lovely person, and she took him by the hand, and they went. And the whole house just changed. And I went, whoa, it's like the house was, for the first time in 100 years, exhaling. And the atmosphere in the kitchen changed, the light changed, everything. And I just said, it's done. We're done now. And the next morning, as I was in the car with my husband, we were driving up the driveway, and a song came on the radio called Lying in the Arms of Mary. And I felt it was definitely from John letting me know he'd arrived home and was with his wife and was going to begin the work of healing. And then a week later, I got a lovely email from Colin saying, thank you, Natasha. The house is like night and day. I can live in my house now. And now he's sold it and moved on, so all is well. So thank you for inviting me to that. And I have to ask you after that ghost busting, listening to the mannequins, is that why you gave up real estate and became a life coach?
Yeah, right.
Because that would have scared me, and I'm a ghostbuster.
Right, I've had enough of these houses.
Exactly. So you're a life coach now, Melissa.
Yeah.
So who do you deal with in terms of clients? So it's business or personal or both?
Both. I would say the number one thing that I work on with my clients is mindset. So the majority of, I guess, like negative experiences that we're experiencing is because of perception.
Yes.
And so a lot of that comes from, like you were talking about earlier today, with things that we're carrying, past events,
Exactly.
that are programming the way that we are perceiving how we're experiencing life.
Yes.
And so lots of times it's triggering the difference between emotions.
Yes.
And actual traumas and things that are carrying
Exactly.
on. So working with mindset and kind of changing that.
Wonderful.
So
Well,
that works in business as well as
yeah, I think psychics and life coaches make a great team
yeah,
because I'm really good at pinpointing what the issue is, the root issue is,
yeah,
and then say you need to go and see a counselor and or a life coach to keep the process going.
yeah,
So thank you for doing that. And I believe we've got your website available for you so people can contact you.
yeah.
And you're here in Kelowna,
That's right.
so that's even good,
Local
even
here,
better.
but we're
And
also available online. So Zoom now
yes,
with
of course.
technology,
Thank God for
like we're
Zoom,
here.
right? Thank God for Zoom and phones. We can both operate long distance, so
Yeah.
that's wonderful. So just stay there. I think we've got a guest coming in who's going to share her ghost story. Hi, Ashley.
Hi, nice to
How,
see you.
how are you
What an
doing?
exciting
Thank you.
story.
That was a real doozy, wasn't it? So
Yes,
I
it was.
understand you've got a couple yourself.
I do. Yeah. Well, I used to work for a natural health retailer, and around the time that I started with that company, I moved into a new rental, which was a really good deal. We didn't pay a lot for the big home that we got. And not long into the rental, we started to notice some strange occurrences, mostly just a weird feeling. But I also had this cat who ended up living to be 20, and he slept with me every night, snuggled in the same way. And the whole time we lived in this house, he would just sit at the closet door and look at this mirror, and he would just guard the mirror. And that was strange. Lots of other strange stuff, just things moving, things going missing, an uncomfortable feeling, not wanting to sleep in my room. And so at some point, I asked a couple of my colleagues who do ghost busting, and they offered to come and check the place out. And so they did. And I've been surrounded by this sort of thing kind of my whole adult life. It wasn't shocking to me, but I don't know. I think maybe I was a little doubtful. Like it seemed so strange. And some of the way they were speaking and talking, I was like, okay. But I went along with it and we went kind of room to room. And then they came into the closet and they were like, it looks like you've got a portal in here. Um, and so we stood in a circle and held hands and did something. This is quite 15 years ago, maybe. But yeah, we were standing in a circle and they were talking and kind of like coercing this being to come out. And they said, "Oh, we can feel her. It feels like it's this young girl." And I'm like, "Okay, okay." And I was just starting to think like, "Oh shoot, I have something to do after this." And I'm starting to get annoyed that it's taking a while. And then all of a sudden I felt these two hands on my leg, like she just fell into my legs and it knocked me back. And I was just like, "Oh my gosh, this is real. This is actually happening." And so she just kind of stood there against me and they kind of guided me on how to comfort her and sort of make her feel safe. And then
Good.
they guided me to talk to her and ask questions and kind of figure out what was wrong and what she needed. And so I would ask, and then one of them was the psychic medium that was able to get her answers. And she said, she's showing this little red box with, I think it was a leaf or a flower on it, this engraved little box. And I was like, "What's wrong with that box?" And she said, "There's something wrong that's upsetting her about that box." And so I am a cannabis user and I carry around this little wooden box, or I did, um, with a little flower on it and it had cannabis in it. And so when they said that, as soon as it hit me, I was like, "Oh my gosh," because we had found out the reason we got a deal on the rental was that the whole basement was a grow operation, that the landlord grew cannabis in the basement. And
Yes.
he had it all set up great. We never smelled it. It wasn't an issue. But so it came out that we had to ask for permission for this.
Oh,
And so we
interesting.
tried. It did sort of settle things, but it came out again that it was the landlord that had to. And so it took some coercing with him to get him to believe everything we were saying and come
Yes.
ask for forgiveness and permission. But then, yeah, once he did, it was beautiful. Gibson came and slept with me again, the cat, and the room felt light. And that kind of started a whole stream of ghost hunting that I started to follow people on after that. It was
Oh,
really
that's
fascinating.
awesome. Well, actually, you hit on so many major points there because a lot of people, when they have a ghost, and there's probably only two reasons why you get a cheap rental, it's either haunted or it's going to grow up.
Or both.
uh, it's like, okay, did somebody die here? That's my first question. But most people say, oh, I've got a ghost. And they're either move out in terror or they just use it as a conversation piece. But I say, would you please ask the ghost if they need help and if are they willing to stay or to leave? And so I think whoever you worked with there did that perfectly. And to
Yeah.
engage you in the process was also wonderful because the other thing is ghosts are attracted to not maybe just the place, but the people that come into the house. So I've got a bit of a ghost story, a ghost busting story I did in Horseshoe Bay. And it's another doozy, so I won't go into great detail, but I had a psychic friend who lived in this house for 3 months and nothing happened. And then my other girlfriend moved in and all hell broke loose. The two top stores were locked off and she'd lie in her bed in the bottom on the lower level. And she said it sounded like they were throwing furniture around. So I went in and did a ghost busting. And the reason why this ghost was haunting my friend was because the ghost was so angry. She was a South African slave who'd been taken away from her country, her family, and her tribe. She'd given birth to two babies who were then taken away from her. And my girlfriend was a birth doula. And so she thought she'll know how to find my babies.
Yes.
And so I was able to help heal her rage and send her up into the light. And like you say, the air changes, the light is greater, everything calms down. So thank you so much for sharing that story. And thank you for being willing to go through that because not everybody would.
Oh, sure.
And, I come from the UK where I used to think it was the weather, but there's this low-lying cloud over the UK, and I swear it's all the ghosts from centuries of brutality and
Yes.
misery and people being
Yes.
really mean and nasty to each other. So
Yeah.
anytime we can heal a ghost, either an outside one or an inner one, we're helping the planet kind of lighten up.
Beautiful.
So thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks for that story. That's a great one.
You bet. Thanks for
Okay.
having me. Nice to
You're
see you.
welcome. Talk to you soon, Ashley.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. So I want to just finish this off by saying there are many forms of ghosts. Absolutely, we can have a ghost that's outside of us, and there's a reason why that ghost is attracted to us, or we're attracted to live in that place where the ghost is. But also to look inside at your own ghosts and heal those, because we don't have to live in the past, as you know. The past is just a perception, and all the time we're living in the past, we're just in that same loop of repeating the same old, same old. We are creators, we have tremendous power, and we need to keep moving forward. Forgiveness is massive. Letting go of guilt, whether you do that forgiveness or just blessing yourself, and just making peace with yourself. Write out what you do want to create, and if you do need to make good with anybody, give them a phone call, write them a letter, dead or alive, and make peace. Amen. So be it, and so it is. So thank you all for joining us on my show, episode 2. And we're going to be coming back next week. And the theme next week is going to be, are you self-sabotaging? I know I've done that a few times in my life, and it's all due to those pesky subconscious beliefs that we were entrenched with, we've inherited from intergenerational trauma, or we've picked up along the way. And my guest next week will be, let's see if I can say her name, Daniela Zielkowski. And she is a certified hypnotherapist, and she has this lovely, warm, soothing voice. And we're going to be talking about all the things that we can do to help you dig deep, get rid of those old subconscious beliefs that are getting in the way of your joy. And if you love this show, please remember to like and subscribe. Spread the joy. See you next week.